Intertalk Radio, you're in to all things music.
Don't worry about stuff so much. Take things and enjoy each moment as it comes. And, because we go through a lot of anxiety from what we do, but things always happen to fill in. So I'm just trusting that.
Welcome to Making It with Terry Woolman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Woolman.
Welcome to Making It with me, your host, Terry Woolman. I really appreciate so much you joining us every week, and I want to let you know that you can find all of our episodes on entertalkmedia.com, Spotify, or go to iTunes and check the podcast under Making It with Terry Woolman. I created this show to focus on what it takes to have a lasting career in the ever-changing landscape of the music business. And by ever-changing, I mean it. The business that we are all in is redefining itself every day. And the guests that I bring on the show are the people that are doing that. They are either creating new ways of continuing to make a living as an artist and a musician, or bending and evolving like I do, to stay in the music business and stay creative and continue to contribute to the arts in the way that's so important to all of us. I met my first guest today back in the 80s. He's one of the first studio musicians that I became friends with and had started working with. And actually, we recorded my first album, Bimini, together. And we'll talk about that very briefly. But let me tell you about my guest. His name is Pat Coil. Pat Coil is an accomplished pianist, composer, producer, arranger, and educator who most recently serves as Associate Professor of Jazz Studies at the renowned University of North Texas. He is also a highly respected studio musician whose credits span the musical spectrum of jazz, R&B, pop, country, and gospel. Based in Nashville, Pat can be heard touring the globe with Michael McDonald and has previously toured with artists including Vince Gill, Carmen McCrae, Woody Herman, Larry Carlton, and Olivia Newton John. His recording credits include Barry Manilow, Natalie Cole, Amy Grant, BeBe Winans, Shania Twain, Nancy Wilson, Trisha Yearwood, Ernie Watts, Kenny Rogers, Patty Austin, and George Burns. Pat has recorded 6 solo jazz albums of his own. His latest album is called Music for Humans and Other Species. Pat Coil, welcome to Making It.
Hey, Terry, it's great to hear you.
And it's great to talk with you. And it's actually, we kind of forget because a lot of us stay in touch, via email and text and Facebook and everything, but we don't get to see each other very often, living in different cities. And I actually really miss, having you in my life and getting to play together and just, and spend time.
Same here.
I'm also really happy for your success that you've had, because you basically recreated your career. And maybe more than twice, but the two that I know about are, moving to Los Angeles and becoming an extremely successful session player. Back in the day when people had 2 and 3 calls a day and cartage and you were in on the early MIDI stuff where, every patch was a double.
And the rental too. You forget about that. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. And renting the gear. And then which I want you to talk about, but we're going to circle back to that. Because it was a very interesting part of the music business, but also then at a certain point, you packed up your family and you moved to Nashville. and we're going to get into that as well. I don't want to just jump right in with that because I know some of that is, kind of personal, the reasons, but they were great reasons, and everything worked out beautifully. Your family's great, your career has blossomed, and would you say that moving to Nashville was a good thing for you?
Oh yeah, definitely. Once I got there, it was one of those things where it felt like I should have done it even earlier. Mm-hmm. I don't regret. I mean, I loved my experience in LA. Obviously, it was, there's nothing like Los Angeles for music, and I had it was mainly a decision for my family. I had two small children, and it was a matter of moving to a place that I wanted them to grow up in, and
better quality of life.
Yeah, it was just we could do the neighborhood thing, and they could ride bikes, and it was not that you can't do that in LA. It's just that our situation at the time, it was not as good as for them as I thought Nashville would be. And Nashville is a little bit closer to what I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Missouri, and it was a little closer to that. And it's also a music center, so it seemed like that made sense for us.
Mm-hmm. By the way, you did play on my Bimini record, and I just want to thank you again, because I just, it was such a pivotal experience for me to make my first record, and to have you be a part of it was really important to me and special. And to me, that album still holds the test of time. Your playing on it was perfect and exquisite. And, I just so appreciate you. And, anytime, those songs still get played on the radio, and anytime I hear them, I just smile and think about all of us being in the studio together. So,
that was a fun project. That was the first time I worked with Abel Moriel, as I recall.
Yeah. And Tom Breckline and
Tommy. In Austin now. He's in Austin.
Yeah, Tommy moved to Austin. Absolutely. So you were born in Jefferson City, Missouri, and
yes.
And I want you to just take us back. So what was it like growing up what were those early years for you in your family and also in Missouri? What was that like? What was your childhood like?
Well, Jefferson City is the capital city, but it was small, like 30,000 people at the time. And I remember being in high school. I remember I was taking piano lessons, and then I started straying from the lessons and starting to play stuff I heard on the radio or on records that my sisters had. And then I got into high school, and I heard the jazz band, and I thought, well, I'd sure like to do that. And so I would go to the band room, and knowing that the band director was up in his corner in his office, and start playing the piano, hoping that he would come down and ask me to be in the jazz band. Of course, he never did. And then I finally went up to his office, and I said, Mr. Hoover, could I, is there any possibility of me playing piano in the jazz band? He says, well, sure. Why don't you show up about 7 a.m. Monday morning, and we'll talk about it. So I did, and I showed up at 7 a.m., and there was a music stand and a tuba and some music. And I said, what's this? And he says, well, in order to be in the jazz band, you have to be in the marching band. So you're going to be a tuba player. So I started playing tuba, and it actually enjoyed it, and actually ended up going to North Texas on a tuba scholarship. So
I know that about you, and I never knew the story. It's just fantastic.
Yeah. So that band director, Jerry Hoover, who just recently retired from, he taught college. He was a college professor in Springfield, Missouri. He had started hiring me for gigs, so I'd go play country club gigs with him, dances and whatever. And it was a big formative part of my education, of starting to play professionally. And so I really owe that guy a lot. Yeah. And so that was before I went to North Texas, that was my background. I learned a whole lot from him.
That's so amazing to me because I also remembered that Dean Parks, who's a friend of ours, who's a fantastic guitarist, was there playing sax at North Texas State.
Yeah.
So I had to chuckle when I learned that you went there on a tuba scholarship, and I've apparently been underusing your talents all these years.
Well, I gave it up. I gave it up after a couple of years.
You did, yeah.
I remember playing in quintets and in concert band and all that stuff, and then when it came down to actually buying a tuba, they were very expensive, and I decided to get a Fender Rhodes instead.
Well, that turned out to be a good decision in hindsight.
Yeah.
So when you started playing tuba in the marching band, you also took a place at the piano chair in the jazz band as well? Yeah,
that's how I got it. I mean, that's how that's what I had to do to be in the jazz band, so that's what I did.
Wasn't your first professional gig playing Sunday services at a prison?
Yeah. Wow.
So what was that about?
Well, my father was a judge. And he was on the state Supreme Court. He was a judge on the state Supreme Court in Missouri, and he knew the warden of the reformatory, which was based outside of town, kind of out in the middle of nowhere on the river. And he said, "Hey, I got you a job." And I said, "Fine, what is it?" And he said, "Well, playing organ for the Sunday services with the choir." And so I would show up and I would play, rehearse with this horrible sounding choir, with inmates, basically. It was a prison, like a work farm with, barbed wire and watchtowers and the whole thing, guard towers. And so I would go on Saturday nights, I'd rehearse, and then I'd play the services Sunday morning. And these guys I started to get like on the guys in the back row because the organ was behind the choir. I started to get on a first name basis with them. And, and then they started passing me letters and saying, "Can you mail this for me?" And when I was 16 years old, I said, "Sure." Yeah. And so I started mailing them, and one guy was passing me a letter every week. And then I showed up one Sunday morning, and they wouldn't let me in because they had an escape, and it happened to be this one guy that passed me the most letters. And so apparently he had a car waiting for him or something, that arranged his escape, and I never did tell my dad about that. But
yeah, I was just thinking about it.
No, I never did tell him. I just kind of I think I quit soon after that, and just kind of okay. Hope the guy had a good life. I hope he was all right.
Right. Wow, that's funny. When you were at North Texas State, I have a recollection of you telling me years ago that Lyle Mays was your college roommate. Do I remember that correctly?
Yes. Yeah, we're still good friends. Yes.
So what was that like? I would imagine at that point, you both were fairly accomplished piano players. And did you learn a lot from each other? Did you encourage each other, or how did that work?
I would say I learned from him.
Okay.
I mean, he showed up. I mean, he showed up as a prodigy, basically. And,
right, fully formed artist.
Yeah. And I was like, my attitude was like, well, I can either compete with this guy or learn from him, and I wisely chose to learn from him. And and we became good friends, and we shared a house, or a duplex, actually. And we had, I had a keyboard in every room, and I used to listen to him play, and I listened to him compose, and we would go to jam sessions together, and became really good friends. And he ended up producing one of my records later on, which was wonderful, a wonderful experience.
Yeah, of course.
And I mean, he was. I don't know, when he came to school, everybody, I actually beat him out for the top band the year that he came, and it was only because I could read better.
Right.
But then he quickly, learned to do that and beat me out the next year. But it's a very competitive school, in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and you ended up doing some work with Pat Metheny. Were you playing with Lyle or for Lyle?
Well, that was after their first record, American Garage, which was kind of the breakout record for Pat. Lyle had overdubbed so many parts that they figured they needed an extra keyboard player to play those parts, and so I went up and rehearsed with them in Boston for a couple of weeks, and we ended up doing a few concerts. And at the time, Pat, that group was pretty much a jazz group in that they were able to play a melody and then go off and play solos, and not quite as structured as they became later on. But with the overdubs of the parts, all of a sudden they were structured, and they had to adhere to a format. Mm-hmm. And he just decided that it was too structured, and so I didn't end up, staying with the band, and which was fine because I was doing all the parts. I wasn't playing any solos or anything. Right. So, but I did grow up with Pat in Missouri. We knew each other. Yeah, we played together. He's from Kansas City, and we went to a couple of same music camps together and stuff like that.
So you guys are the same age?
Basically, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's circle back to your time in LA. And you mentioned don't forget the rentals. Can you educate people, because that doesn't really happen as much anymore as it did back then?
Well, yeah. It's a strange thing. All the synthesizer players, and I think then all the they ended up being guitar players and drummers too. Right. When they used electronic gear, or we would rent our gear to the studio, to Warner Brothers, Universal, Fox, whoever. And as with the idea being that they expected us to have the latest and greatest of everything, and that we reinvest that money into, that was sort of the thinking that went into it. The story is that someone called Ian Underwood, I believe, and asked him if they could use his Fender Rhodes on a session. Mm-hmm. And he said, sure, I'll rent it to you for $50 or whatever. And that started the practice of it. And sometimes the rental fees that we charged were more than what we made on the session. It was really interesting.
Yeah. And then also you were getting doubles. Anytime you would overdub, because you technically were taking the place of perhaps a flute player if you would use a flute sample or an acoustic piano and then a Rhodes part.
Yep, those were the days.
Weren't they?
Yeah. It's not like it was our idea to charge rental. It was just that all the other guys, that came ahead of you and were maybe some of the more first call type guys, they made sure that you turned in those rental bills. If you charged less, you'd get a phone call.
Right, because everybody kind of worked together and supported each other to lift or to set the bar high and maintain it.
Yeah, and it's not. And the music budgets for the studios were for the movies. Were the smallest thing and almost inconsequential compared to what they spent on the movies and TV shows.
So that means that because of all that time, I'm hoping this is true, that you spent doing film scores and TV shows and, of course, record dates, that you've got a retirement fund, from all of those sessions. And although our retirement fund is definitely in limbo. So.
Yeah, I know. We're about to start lobbying our Tennessee senators right now.
Yeah, we're doing that nationally. So, it's kind of amazing. And apparently the fund was mismanaged, is part of the story, and I'm sure there's many sides of the story as there always are. But the thing is, musicians, if you're out there and you're listening and you want to protect your future, you might want to look into this and get involved. And, I think get involved in anything and everything.
Absolutely.
Don't keep your head in the sand about life and politics and music, and, have an opinion, whatever it is, and, and get informed and stand by it.
Right.
So, but those days were good. I mean, you did a lot of session record dates and and that seems to have changed too. Is it that way in Nashville? In LA, like the harpist, people that play classical harp or jazz harp, they all stick together in that way. Like when somebody new rolls into town, they've always been good about this, and decides that they're going to go do a gig for $100, they get a phone call from the other harpist to say, no.
Yeah.
We don't leave the house for, $100 with a $50,000 harp.
Yeah.
To go play in a restaurant or anything. So, but that seems to have shifted. There are less performance venues to play. Not when you're doing concerts, but club work wise, people are coming in and playing for $50 or free, and I don't know that really helps. The collective, our collective community of musicians.
No, it doesn't, and we all understand being young and hungry and wanting to get established, and the wrong way to do it is to work for free, and you're hurting everyone doing it. When I taught college, I would always advise, hey, you're worth something, please play for what you're worth, and don't shortchange yourself, because you're really shortchanging everyone.
Right.
And it's hard, because there's always those who will do it for less. And you just hope that enough people care about quality and and doing the right thing that it stays that way. But there's definitely.
Well, Pat, yeah, I agree with you 100%. Is that something they taught you at North Texas State? And also, how do you define your worth as a musician?
Oh boy, that's tough.
It is.
I mean, that's one good thing about the musicians union, is that they do try to set some standards as far as what you should be paid for different kinds of work, and it's that's the best thing I can say about the union, actually, is that they have set a standard that everyone, at least what you're supposed to get, even if you're not getting what you're supposed to get.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do you define your own worth? I don't know. That's a hard one. I mean, there's.
I get asked that question as well, and it comes up, more often than not, because you and I, we both music direct, we both arrange and produce, and of
mm-hmm.
course play. We tour, we record, and it's sort of a moving target as to what we get paid for each of our services. It's not like being a plumber,
right? Where
you get $100 an hour, or a minimum, or we're constantly being asked to do something for, or for the same service, the same skill set, the same 100% showing up and being present and giving it our all for mm-hmm. sort of a sliding scale. Sometimes we get paid extremely well. Other times it's a little lean for the same
mm-hmm.
work.
Yeah.
So
yes.
I'm always curious how my peers and friends navigate through that.
Yeah, it's boy, I don't know. You just do the best you can, and you sometimes you get offered work, and sometimes you just have to say no if it's
right.
If it's just ridiculously low, or mm-hmm. they're not going to do it the right way, then I try to think in long term that it's in my best interest to turn down something that's not, someone that's not paying me what I think I should get. And mm-hmm. It's interesting. My son's an actor in LA, and it's kind of the same. Right. They go through this exact. I mean, he does a lot of commercials now, mm-hmm. and he, he's going. It's the same thing. It's the, he gets offers to do things that are all over the map as far as what they offer to pay, and he has to make decisions just like we did.
Right. You mentioned when you were teaching college, so I want to know, why is teaching and mentoring important to you?
Well, I just sort of fell into it, first, when I was actually a student at North Texas, one of my teachers was a guy named Rich Madison, who was an unbelievably great jazz euphonium player. But he was on the faculty there, and he was sort of a mentor to me and started taking me out to actually do clinics with him, where that was my first experience actually trying to teach people. And that always stayed with me, and I think I even taught private lessons when I was in school. And then further on down the line, once I got to Nashville, I decided to, there was a college here called the Middle Tennessee State University, and somebody approached me and said, "Hey, do you want to, teach piano lessons here?" And I said, "Sure." So it was an adjunct; it didn't pay much,
right?
But I started teaching students, and I always taught privately a little bit, but I started teaching a little bit more actively with this at the university, and found that I really enjoyed it. And especially when you'd get a really talented student in there who really is eager to learn, and it's all part of giving back, I guess. Like people did that for us. So,
right.
And then when I did teach at North Texas, it was a wonderful time that I had there. The students were fantastic, and a lot of times you'd walk in, you hear them play something, and say, "Hey, could you play that again?" And you get someone like a Lyle Mays walk in, and the challenge is like, what can I show them, and how can I help them? How can I stay out of their way, but at the same time impart some wisdom of things that that they don't know. So that's so it's a challenge, to especially for teaching someone at a really high level,
right?
And enjoyed it very much.
And how were you able to balance your time between touring, recording, teaching, and also some family time? When I was teaching in North Texas, I was trying to do all of that. Like I had a house here in Nashville. I had an apartment down in Denton, Texas, near Dallas. And I was still touring, as I still do, with Michael McDonald. So I was trying to do all at once, and we ended up like not staying at the teaching job in Texas just because we decided that we didn't want to live in Texas, and we wanted to stay in Nashville because we liked it so much. Right.
And our kids were there, and grandkids and all that stuff. And yes, it's a definite balancing act. I think, I'm traveling more now than I ever did, and I think a lot of us are.
Yes. Yeah.
And a lot of the guys that I know that have been, A-list first call session players are now out on the road more. And it's interesting because at this age, I never thought I'd be traveling like I do now. But it's kind of where the business has gone. And, because more artists are having to make their money by actually playing live than they do making records, since the business has changed so much in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, that leads me to talking about your new album, Music for Humans and Other Species, and I want you to talk about the record and what inspired you to make it. But I also, was thinking, since the ability to make a living as an artist from album sales has changed, what motivates you to keep making records? And by the way, don't stop, because I love that you're still making records. And I'm not going to stop either.
Yeah. Well, it's what I started out to do.
Yes.
It's like, okay, what do I really want to do? Well, I want to play my own music. I want to make my own music, and I want to play with the people I want to play with. And making a living kind of I won't say gets in the way of it, but kind of puts a lot of that on hold, or puts it on the back burner so much that this record I finally it had been years since I'd done one.
Right.
And you play on everybody else's stuff, and I just thought, well, I want to do my own stuff. And it's not, certainly not to make money. It's not going to make money. but it's just because of the love of doing it. And I've always been a writer. I always compose, and it's an outlet for, how I feel and what I'm thinking at the time. And I can't not do it. And I think that's
right.
I think most really good players that are driven in that way, so they don't really have a choice. They have to. And I'm definitely in that category. I have to. And because there's nothing like sitting down and writing a song, working on it, and then going in the studio and have it come to life, and then having that, having that accomplishment and having that creativity, that creative process. It's definitely where my happy place is.
I totally relate.
I know you do.
Yeah. So I want to encourage everybody who's listening to our conversation right now to go check out your music. And you can find it on iTunes and all the various places, but you can also go to patcoil.com, PATCOIL.com. So how would you describe music for humans and other species, and how did you come up with the title?
Well, it's interesting that the lead-in music you played was a rough mix of something I was just working on. I'm here at a studio right now.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, we're in the kind of the overdubbing mixing stage,
and we don't often get to play things that are not quite completed yet. So I thought it'd be really fun to kick off the show with something that you're working on right now.
Yeah, and that was really interesting when you played that. I was going, well, I'm just now working on that song again, and I don't know, the title just hit me one day, like, and I don't know, my wife said, yeah, that's a good title.
So, good. Sometimes it's no more complicated than that.
Yeah, so I stuck with it, and I've got some really good players on the record. There's, actually, Pat Metheny's drummer, Danny Gottlieb is on it, and some local guys. Marcus Finney is a local drummer here, is a great guy, and then Jim White's a great jazz drummer is on it. And, Jeff Coffin just overdub on it, sax player and Mark Douthit, the sax player that I work with on Michael McDonald's band, and so there's a lot of great players on it, and they worked pretty hard to make this music come to life. So I think I'm going to be pretty proud of it. You know how that process goes, where you hate it one minute and you love it the next. But I hope I end up loving it.
Well, so far what I've heard, I love it, and please let me know when it's done so that I can go buy it, but also help promote it. I'll definitely put it up on the website and everything too.
I appreciate it.
And let's talk about your music directing aspect as well of your career. You've been musical director for Carmen. You've done some TV things, as we both have. Carmen McCrae, CeCe Winans TV show, the Billy Gilman Christmas special, Dove Awards, the Manilow Country TV special with Barry Manilow, and I'm sure many more. How would you describe your responsibilities as a TV music director?
Oh gosh, it's a heavy load. You know it.
I do. I sure do.
I think that I played in the Byron Allen show with you.
You did. I was looking at your credits. You have so many credits that I've actually forgotten some of them that we've actually done together. We did play in the Byron Allen show together.
Yeah.
And actually maybe even more than once. But yeah, that was I remember playing with Jermaine Jackson with you. That was one of the things we had done.
Right. And Nathan was playing, Nathan East was playing
bass, and before Abraham took it over. Yeah. Luis Conte, Gerald Albright.
Oh, yeah.
It was great. Fun band.
I just saw Gerald on this summer. On our tour, we played a gig together. He and Michael. Nice. Yeah. Great. And he played on some of my stuff with Sheffield Lab, the stuff I did for Sheffield Lab.
Right, the live recordings.
Yeah. Anyway, music directing. I mean, you're responsible for. You're responsible for picking the band. You're responsible for the music, for the arrangements. Most of the time. What I remember doing this TV show that CeCe Winans did. We did 2 seasons of that called CeCe's Place, and they would they would take 2 shows a day, and it was pretty much live. And so I had to get a band that would cover, and she's from from the Black gospel world, but she would also have guests on her shows from what they called contemporary Christian world, which is basically like pop. And so I had to find a band that could do all of that, and and background singers and the whole thing. And what they would do is that they would get these artists that she'd have in the show. I would typically get the music, as late as the night before. And most of the time it was the night before. You'd beg them to please send it, and then finally you get a cassette. Remember those?
Yeah, I sure do.
The night before, and then you're having to make charts and do arrangements like with no sleep basically until you get to the studio to tape, and then you pull it off, and that's what they just expect. They say, "Oh, it must be easy."
Right, you get punished for,
yeah, exactly.
You don't get praised. They go, "Wow, well, I guess we actually don't need more than 24 hours to do that.
Yeah,
why don't we try it now in 12 hours?" That's what happens with TV.
So
yeah,
that's the way it is.
Well, so do you enjoy being a music director, or do you prefer being a sideman where you can just focus on your playing?
I like both.
I do too.
It's much less pressure being a sideman. I would say it's in some ways it's a lot more fun.
Yes.
And but I enjoy the challenge of putting together stuff and getting really good players together to play too. So I would say I enjoy both.
Yeah. One of the guests that we had on our show, I believe it was last year, was the incredible horn arranger, Jerry Hay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was really fun to spend an hour talking with him.
Yeah,
and, he's influenced all of us, I think, as horn arrangers and string arrangers as well. I know you've got a funny Jerry Hay story. Could you share that?
Well, yeah, I was, I was doing a TV date, and I can't remember who the writer was, but at the end of the session, they do what they call source music, and it's usually they save it to the end, and there's not a whole lot of time, and so they scratch out these charts and say, well, this is in the style of whatever, and then go, and they count it off, and so obviously there wasn't time to write a lot of parts for anybody, so the composer and producer says, "Hey, Pat, can you get up your best Jerry Hay horn section sound and improvise some licks over this?" And okay, I said, "Okay, sure." And behind me, directly behind me while I'm doing this is Jerry Hay, Chuck Finley, and Gary Grant in the trumpet section, and I'm feeling like a fool. Like, what am I doing?
Right.
I'm coming in with this cheesy synth sound and improvising something that I think Jerry Hay would write. And I just felt like a fool, and I don't know if I ever got to talk to Jerry about it, but I'm sure he was amused.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
The situations we get put in are sometimes just hard to wrap your head around, when things like that would happen.
Yeah.
Boy, we all have so many stories like that. What do you think, it sounds like you had some really good solid training when you were a kid with piano and of course tuba. And, and then you went to one of the best schools in the world for music, and you moved to LA, then moved to Nashville, and, basically started at the beginning, the beginning of the food chain again. You're doing demos, and even though you were a top call LA studio musician, starting and building rebuilding your reputation and earning your place in the community. What do you think best prepared you for your career? Because you have managed to you've managed to stay successful and visible and working with great artists. So was it And I'm whether it's things that your mom and dad taught you, your early teachers, your brothers or sisters, or of course college, and from your peers. Like, what are some of the lessons that really prepared you to stay vital?
Well, I think it's important to be prepared, and there's so much work that goes into being able to do the session or being able to do the gig before you get there. And, and that's just preparation and practice and practice and practice and practice and listening and listening and listening and listening. And I've always taught my students that it's important to be versatile. That's worked for me, musically versatile. And it's more than just learning, I'm going to learn how to play this style. I'm going to learn how to play this style. The difference becomes, I think, if you play another style, like say I'm going to play a country tune, it's actually to really love what you're going to play and really love the style that you're going to play, rather than trying to just, this is how I think it should sound, because that comes across to people when they listen to you, is that, this guy actually loves what he's doing. And so that's really important. Also, I think just the attitude in general. It's like if a producer or a contractor has the choice between two equally talented people, and one of them has the attitude like, I'd rather be anywhere but here, or I'm too good for this gig. And then the other guy is like, what can I do to help? Anything has the attitude of I'm here to serve, basically. Then, who's he going to call back? That's simple, but it's amazing how many kids don't get that. Right. And I try to impart that to them. And just being prepared, being versatile, knowing what the gig takes and being ready before you get there is real important.
So those are great tips, and I really appreciate that. Let's talk about a few of the artists that you've worked with and are currently working with. And they don't need to be long stories, but maybe just like a little standout moment or something that you have learned or appreciated from working with these artists. I'll name a few. Let's start with both of our favorite artists and people, Michael McDonald. He's just a wonderful guy.
Yes, he is. He's just a genuine human being and humble. He's one of those guys that was just one of the guys in the band, and he happened to, because of his incredible voice, he happened to become a superstar.
Right.
But yeah, he's a joy to work for. I've worked for him since 2002, and I play organ with him. I play B3 with him and some synth with him, because he plays great piano and keyboards. And I have learned. I told him once, I said, if I could just learn if I could just get half of the soul that you have, when you play and in your music, then I'll be happy, And yeah, I can't say enough good things about Michael.
Yeah. And you're going out this summer with Michael McDonald and Chaka Khan for a summer tour, correct?
We just did that.
Oh, you just did it?
We had a 2-month tour. It was fantastic.
Great.
Played lots of fun venues. Played the Hollywood Bowl, which was great. And Chaka's band was top notch. It's always great to tour. I mean, it's one thing about the summer tours is that with Mike anyway, we're usually doing most of the gigs with another band. We've done it with Toto, and we've done it with Boz Scaggs, and it's fun to hang around other players that are on a different gig and kind of compare notes and get to know people. So the tours are once you're on stage, everything's great. It's the getting there and the drudgery of travel. Right. The older you get, the less appealing that is, and the harder it gets. Actually,
it does get harder. Yeah. It's some of that has nothing to do with age, but some of it does.
Right.
It's become less glamorous to travel and tour than it used to be. But the playing, when you're on stage doing it, it's like it's worth it.
It's so much fun, you know. I mean,
isn't it?
Yeah, just to play for a sold out crowd somewhere, and you know, just get all that energy coming back at you is just, there's nothing like it. I really do enjoy that part of it.
Let's talk about a few other artists. Another great piano player who, you know, was essentially a band member who happened to have a great voice also and became a star, Barry Manilow. And you've worked with him as well. Yes. Yeah.
I've had a great experience with Barry. I mean, when I was in LA, I played on a couple of his records for a producer named Michael Lloyd out there. And actually played piano, and you know, which surprised me because Barry's a piano player. But then I ended up,
but
when he
you know, Barry's also a great arranger, but he still has other people do some of his arrangements, so it doesn't surprise me. You know, he's a collaborator. He loves collaborating.
Right, and he came to Nashville to do a country special. It's called Manilow Country. And basically it's like with all these country stars, he would be singing his songs with them in a country version of his songs, which actually is pretty cool. They lend themselves very well to that treatment. And my job was to sort of bridge the gap, you know. I remember coming out to LA and to rehearse, you know, and he would give me this big long 12-page charts of his music, and he said, "Now, how are you gonna make this so that the country guys can play it?" And I said, "Barry, everything you see here, I'm going to put on one page," and what they call number charts, which is how the Nashville, you know, country guys do it. Not just the country guys, actually. And he didn't understand. He was very skeptical. And once we got to Nashville and started rehearsing, of course, it's the music director's part is to pick the right guys that can bridge those gaps.
Casting.
And you know, I picked a really good band, and he was just blown away, you know, that on how they performed his music and how good it sounded. And so yeah, it was a wonderful experience. I really I did enjoy, you know, and I enjoy people. I think Barry is one of those guys who knows what he wants, and he lets you know what he wants. And some people take that the wrong way, but I understood it, you know, and we got along great.
There's two other piano players that come to mind. I don't know why I'm leaning towards piano players, but these names are just popping out from your very extensive, you know, resume and credits. And they're popping out because these are two artists that I had the privilege and thrilled to work with as well. So I wanted to know what your experience was with them. One was Billy Preston, the other is Little Richard.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well,
wow,
Little Richard was basically I did one concert with, and that was it was one of those Beverly Hills fundraiser kind of places at, you know, somebody's mansion, and that was fun. You know, it was with, you know, on those things it was guys like I think JR and I think it was Neil Steubenhouse. I think who played guitar on that. Well, Dean, it was Dean and John.
Yeah, Dean Parks.
John Hobbs was the other keyboard player. So, you know, it was all these LA cream of the crop guys, and you get to do these gigs, and one of them was with Little Richard, and it was a lot of fun. With Billy, we did, with Mike, we've done, I think, 4, I'm familiar with the show Soundstage.
Yes.
We've done 4 of those over the years, and one of them, he had Billy there as a guest, and and it was just, I mean, it wasn't too long before he passed. It was maybe a year or 2 before he passed, but man, he really just sang great. And on one of the times he went back and he played B3, and so I was sitting right next to him playing keyboards next to Billy Preston. You know, and this is like the 5th Beatle I'm sitting next to, and he's and so I'm looking over at his B3 patches, and I'm trying to remember each one of them, and he's, you know, he couldn't have been nicer, and he was like, you know, it's wonderful when you get close to legends like that, and, you know, they are for a reason.
Yes, and it's also wonderful, and it generally turns out to be true that the people that are the legends that we've been fortunate to get to play with, most of them are really warm and appreciative, and they have a lot of gratitude, and it's sort of the higher up the evolution of success, the nicer the people seem to be.
Right. I think you're absolutely right about that.
I found that my first experience with that was when I first moved to LA and started working with Joe Sample.
Man.
And Joe was
he's a hero of mine.
Of mine as well. And I understand that, for you being a piano player, but Joe couldn't have been nicer to me. And he just assumed that I was as talented as I needed to be in the room with him. He never questioned anything. He was very gracious. He played on that first record that you and I did together.
Yeah, that's
right. He came in and played on a couple tunes as well. Yeah. I was in piano heaven with you and Rich Ruttenberg and Joe Sample. It was just amazing. Yeah, it was great. Yeah. I can't not ask you before we get back to talking about your career, but Luther Vandross.
Oh,
did you record with him?
No, I don't think I ever did.
I saw.
If that's on my resume, well, maybe I did, and I just I do that.
Something? It's under the concerts live and tape, so it.
Oh, okay. Well,
it might have been a TV show or something. Well, that's pretty funny to me, because that sort of speaks to the whole point. Your career. You can't possibly remember every single thing that you've done because you've been doing it a long time, and some of these things are one-offs, even though they're incredible.
Right. Or they're multi-artists. You know what that was? I bet that was. I used to do this show called Dionne and Friends, and it was like a couple of seasons of a Dionne Warwick show, not Solid Gold, but the one she did after that. And I was in the band for that, and I'm pretty sure he came and was on that show. That's where that was.
You've had a lot of experience and credits working for film and TV. Do you enjoy that? Like the Star Trek Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Sesame Street, Airport, Caddyshack, The Abyss. Are those fun for you, or are they just like complete high pressure, read and try to not get lost?
Well, I think the best description I've ever heard of that kind of work, where you're in a room full of, with an orchestra, basically.
World-class orchestra, yeah.
World-class orchestra, the best in the world in L.A., it's 98% boredom and 2% terror. And that's and I have a story about my very first session there. It was for a movie called The Best of Times, starring Robin Williams. I remember that. Mm-hmm. And I was there, and a contractor took a chance on me. And somebody recommended me and took a chance on me. And so I show up, and there's two other keyboard players on the date. This is when there were 2 or 3 keyboard players on a date. Okay. And John Berkman and Mike Lang, who were both like incredible musicians. And so the very first cue, I look in my book, and the very first cue is a piano solo, all written out 2 hands in the key of D flat. And it was for 16 bars, and it was my very first thing. It was just me, and I'm terrified. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh well, my career has come down to this. I'm either gonna read this thing and do okay, or I'm just never ever gonna do this again. And so I'm furiously like practicing before the demo, as quiet as I can. Mm-hmm. And they count it off. And I somehow get through this, and I read it, and they, so they're waiting for the booth to say yay or nay. They said, okay, move on to M221 or whatever it was. And man, I had I was sweating. I had the biggest relief. And then I found out years later, and either, I can't remember if it was John Berkman or Mike Lang, that those guys put that on my stand. It was not in there. It was not even in my book. It was like, well, oh, here's the new guy. Welcome to LA.
So was it kind of an initiation for you, you think? Or?
Yeah. That's exactly
right,
what
let's see what you got.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And, and that's so funny too, because it's so, there's so many beautiful parts of that story, but one of them that is the most subtle part about that is when you work in film and TV. Yeah. I found this out from when we used to do, when I music directed the late night talk shows. If everything goes fine, you get zero praise. If anybody makes a mistake, like it's all on you. So like
Absolutely.
That big pivotal moment in your life and in your career, basically there was, a minute of silence, while you see people talking through the glass and then no notes, no thank yous and no anything. You're just moving on.
Yep.
It's amazing. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, we're getting towards the end of the show. So I wanted to ask you, before I get to my closing questions, I wanted to ask you about health. I know that you love hiking and I'm wondering where you hike and what else you do at home and also when you're traveling to stay physically and also mentally healthy.
Okay. Well, I'm traveling, I force myself, no matter how tired I am, to go to the hotel gym and work out in the mornings. When I'm home, Nashville is one of the best things about Nashville is that there's lots of parks, and there's very close to my house. There's a lake called Radnor Lake, which is several thousand acres of just forest with trails, and I try to go there as often as I can. And when I'm traveling, if I'm in Colorado, I'll try to find if I have a day off, I'll definitely find a hike somewhere. Especially the older you get, the more important it is to stay in shape and to be healthy and I do the best I can. Not always successful, but I do the best I can. Yeah.
And what about endorsements? What's your philosophy about endorsements as an artist and as a piano player? Do you have long-term relationships with particular companies, or is that the kind of thing you kind of shy away from?
No, I've been with Yamaha for a long time, and use their keyboards as part of my setup.
Right.
And I'm also a Hammond artist for their new XK5, which is their kind of the wannabe 3, one of the wannabe 3s, and it's a wonderful live instrument. It weighs much less than a B3 and sounds pretty convincing when you go out in front. So,
got it.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that. So we've only got about 2 minutes left in the conversation, and I need to get to my closing questions. The first is a two-part one. Since this show is called Making It, what does making it mean to you both personally and professionally? And can you also share 3 tips for success that have driven your career?
Whoa. Well, making it is making a living doing what you love, to me. And so far, knock on wood, I'm still doing it and hope to do it for a long time. So it's as simple as that, and being able to have a family and great friends and play good music. And
3 tips for success that have driven your career.
Gosh. Well, I kind of alluded to it earlier, being prepared, being friendly and open and having a good attitude with other musicians and other artists. And that's, I don't know, I'm not sure I can think of a third one.
That's okay, because you've been really informative throughout this whole conversation. So my final question, Pat, to you is, at this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh, gosh. Don't worry about stuff so much. Just take things and enjoy each moment as it comes, and try not to worry about what's coming and how you're going to do. Just being a little bit more relaxed about things, I think. because we go through a lot of anxiety as from what we do, and a lot of competition and being self-employed. Basically, you don't know. For most of my career, I've been self-employed. You're kind of like, you look at the next month in the calendar and you're going, oh, I guess things are over next month. But things always happen to fill in. So I'm just trusting that, I guess, that things will happen.
Well, I would say so far so good.
So far so good.
You've been, from my perspective, as long as I've known you, you've been having a good life, and you've made great music, and you've made a great family, and those, you kind of can't ask for more, I think. In life.
You can't.
So really beautifully done, Pat. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend the hour with you, and I want to thank you for your time, and I can't wait to hear the new record when it's done, and also I want to thank everybody for spending the hour with us. We really appreciate you. Pat, any closing note?
No, it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for having me on, and best of luck to you, and I hope we get to play together someday again.
That would be great. All right, we need to make that happen. I'm making a new album now. Let's find a space for you. That's done.
I'm all for it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. Everybody, we'll see y'all next week. Thanks for joining us.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Woman.